First and foremost, I want to say all praises be unto the Most High Almighty, High Christ, our Lord and our Savior. This is the Essene Community Church of Christ. My name is Archbishop Shamar.
And I'm Bishop Arak.
We be bringing you today's Sabbath report / lesson. All right. First of all, Shabbat Shalom, peace and blessings. Happy Sabbath to everybody out there, far and near. All right. Go out of once again, Bishop Michaela, for the news that we brought out. We're going to go into part 2 of last week's lesson. All right, on the sovereignty of God. All right, and last week, just to run through a couple of principles, we went into Psalms 15, 115 and 2. All right, where it says, but our God is in the heavens. He's done whatsoever he pleases. Our God does whatever he pleases. This is what we emphasized on last week, starting off. Our God does whatever he pleases. And this is them defining the sovereignty of God. All right, that we have to understand that God is sovereign. That's why I went into the lesson, to understand the mind frame of God when he created the world and his relationship to the world is from a sovereign standpoint. And the first standpoint you have to understand from a sovereign is they do whatever they please. That's what makes them a sovereign, all right, when it comes into terms of who can tell them something within that realm. All right, so God does whatever he pleases. When he did the earth, when he drafted everybody, when he crafted anything, he is not doing it for particular things. He's doing whatever he pleases. All right. And we went into the doctrine of the sovereignty of God. All right. Let's give us the sovereignty of God. What is the sovereignty of God doctrine?
What is the sovereignty of God? Sovereignty of God is a Christian teaching that God is the supreme authority and all things are under his control. God is the sovereign Lord of all by an incontestable right as the creator, owner, and possessor of heaven and earth. Sovereignty is an attribute of God based upon the premise that God, as the creator of heaven and earth, has absolute right and full authority to do or allow whatever he desires.
All right, so the sovereignty of God is a Christian teaching. All right, and the reason why it's a Christian teaching, it's not an Israelite teaching. Once again, when we were part of the Israelites, we thought Satan was doing other things. You know what I mean? He has control or whatever. It wasn't under the notion that everything, even your own decisions, because a lot of people don't even understand predestination. They believe that they are the ones choosing their destiny, right? And this is a deception, right? Because God, under this understanding, the sovereignty of God, we know that he's under full control of your destiny, your future. Everything is under his control. There's nothing in this world that is not under the direct control of God. All right, the Lord, our God. All right, God the Father. More specifically, when we're speaking about, all right, because God the Father then gave this power onto his Son. All right, God the Father, we went through, his justice was running all through the old covenant. All right. Sovereignty is an attribute of God based on the premises that God, as the creator of heaven, has absolute right and full authority to do whatever he desires. All right. And we went into creative property rights. All right. Which shows that God, because he's creator, owns the property rights over anything created. All right. And when you're dealing with creation, writing, anything, you have the ability to write, create any story that you want with no restrictions. And we see that in the music world, movie world, that people speak about them wanting to create, write, without somebody telling them, you can do this or you can't do this. All right. You could do any story of any person that you want. They can make up any type of story they want. So when we're speaking about the sovereignty of God on a whole base, God could write the story any way he wants. He can make somebody crippled. He can make somebody this. It's his characters, his story to bring about his point. You have zero say in it. It's like people who's just on set for the director. You have zero say. He's telling you what to do. And however, what character you're going to play, that's the character you're going to play. All right, that is the definition of the sovereignty of God. All right, everything is under his complete control. All right, the sovereignty of God consisted of supremacy, kingship, Godhead. All right, God can do whatever, and none of us can say, "What are you doing?" All right, we don't have that authority to tell him that. All right, and this is some things that people have to understand when it comes to how this relates to their lives. And it's easy to be said when, you're one of the protected ones, you don't have, anything devastating happen to you. There's people that's going through a lot of trauma that ask and question these things about God, and they have to understand God's authority for the creative direction. And you have to understand it's like you're on a set and you're like, you know what? This is the part he wants me to play. Let me play the part. You get what I'm saying? Instead of the sulking and the wondering part. Right? And that's what a lot of people do, not understanding what sovereignty is and how that relates to creative control and things of that nature. All right, we went and showed that how God is the only continent, all right, and the only blessed continent on the earth that rules, all right, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, all right, in contrast to where we see the Pope who's taken on that same title. All right, we showed that God was sovereign in his mercy, all right, showing that mercy has to be under sovereignty because this is not owed to somebody. Mercy is not owed to anybody, all right, and God says he will have mercy on who we have mercy on, all right, and I went into it showing that we're all sinners, we're all damned, and God, in order to choose people, he's bestowing the mercy. So we're all damned and under Adam's sin and in a damned state, and we don't realize it. And God, seeing us, is able to bestow that mercy. And we use the example of a poor person outside with change. All right. And when you see them outside, you know that they're damned and wretched, and you know that they're asking for change. But you're very particular on who you're giving that change to. That's God when it comes to his relationship to this world. Everybody's damned and looks like the poor person outside asking for change to him. And he, with his divine will, his whatever you want to do, is bestowing on whoever and taking them out of damnness. And then some people are rich, but that still doesn't mean you're not damned because you're going to hell anyways. All right. So we're going to get on to the part 2 of this week's. All right. So we're going to start at Isaiah 53 and 1. And part 2 of this week's is at page 7. All right. So page 7 in the document.
The book of Isaiah, chapter 53, verse 1. Who had believed our report, and to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed?
All right. So who is going to believe our report, and to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? All right, we go into the scripture all the time to show that the Most High, all right, how he operates, he doesn't operate openly, all right? He sends the word of the Lord to a chosen vessel, and that vessel, all right, is revealed to the word of the Lord, all right? And the word of the Lord sends out this chosen vessel, all right, after it reveals what the Father has stated to him, and they have to go and declare, "Thus saith the Most High," all right? And the Most High is dealing with this individual secretly. We've seen this in the wilderness, all right? The Most High is not putting his arm around them, sponsoring, saying, "This is what I'm dealing with." All right, so this leaves it on the people to have their ears and their hearts circumcised to come to understanding and believe what the individual is saying, or to differentiate if it's a false prophet, because this is how false prophets crept in. All right, and this is how the Most High operates. You have to hang on some level of faith to get to truth and understanding, because God, the way he operates in the world, and these are key things. This is why he's putting in the Bible. He's not going to spell it out for you. This is why he didn't go and say, "This is Moses and this is me and this is who I." This is not what he did with the people. You have to have some level of faith in this world when it comes to anything you're dealing with. All right, so with that being said, we're going to scriptures to ensure that they're translated, interpreted, and taught correctly. All right, with that being said, we're going to go to Wisdom of Solomon. And we're going to go to 6 and 1. So this same sovereignty that we spoke of last week, all right, the sovereignty of God, him able to do what he willeth and anything he wants, and him having creative control and property rights as well. All right. God bestows that onto kings. And that's what we're going to show this week. So we're going to show that from last week. We showed how God operates, how he deals, how he takes people out of wretchedness, how he does whatever he willeth. All right. Whatever he wants to do. But for us to understand, as we know, he uses a lot of nature. He created a physical version of that so that we could constantly see that relationship and that understanding. All right. And this was passed down onto kings. So we're at Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 6, verse 1.
Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 6, verse 1. This is out of the Apocrypha. Hear therefore, O ye kings, and understand. Learn, ye that be judges of the ends of the earth. Give ear, ye that rule the people, and glory in the multitude of nations. For power is given you of the Lord, and sovereignty from the highest. Who shall try your works and search out your counsels? All
right, so for power is given. Hear therefore, O kings, understand, learn. All right, ye that be judges in the ends of the earth. All right, power is given unto you of the Lord. So once again, I showed you God transferring that power. So he has power. This is him saying, transference of power. A transference of power. All right. And sovereignty from the highest. All right. So sovereignty is coming to them from behind the highest. So that same sovereignty of God we're speaking about, and his creative control, and his, you could do whatever you will, whatever, he passes on to kings. And I think the people of this world, they didn't understand how that relates to God. And this is why people don't like when someone has full control like that. All right. And it's, you have to understand who God is to understand how these stuff operate. And this is why you can be like, who's telling this person you got to rule everything and do everything? But people are not seeing it from a standpoint that God puts things in this realm that teach us things. And this is what he placed here. All right. Because it teaches you about him. You have to respect that type of control. And that type of control is not respected, which is why people want a republic. This is why people want a democracy. And they went away from monarchy. All right. Go check out the monarchy of God. All right. Go check those lessons out. Understand monarchy. Understand republic. Understand what a democrat is. All right. We broke that down extensively from the beginning of the Bible, the history from the beginning of the time to now, how we got to the governmental structure we are in now. All right. So God passed his sovereignty onto kings. People have to understand that. That same God doing whatever he will, taking any mercy he wants, and this is what some people have to understand. Because sometimes we're sitting here like, you know what? How come the queen don't come out and do such and this, or do that and that, and do, this is your sovereign. You can do whatever you want. Anybody you're dealing with is the same way you're dealing with God. Okay? God doesn't deal with anybody like that. And we went through last week where even when it deals with his interference in public affairs or affairs in the world, he uses his sovereignty. You're not going to tell God when to interfere into a affair that's happening. Because first of all, the way it's set up, you deserve whatever's happening to you. All right? So he doesn't have to step, and that's what he doesn't do. And this is why he hasn't stepped in for so long. And now when he steps in, this is when people remember, oh shoot, God is sovereign. And we made mention of the Revelation 18. It hasn't done it in so long. And that's why in there they're going to say God hasn't forgotten. He hasn't forgotten. Because, right, it has been so long that he stepped in and interfered in anything. People think he's not even here no more. He's gone to another world. That's what people are really thinking. All right? Continue for us.
Verse 4, because being ministers of his kingdom, ye have not judged aright, nor kept the law, nor walked after the counsel of God. Horribly and speedily shall he come upon you. For a sharp judgment shall be to them that be in high places.
All right, and this is what people have to understand. That don't worry about that power that the person has, because that's what a lot of people. Oh, what are they doing? God is watching that individual. Whatever's happening, remember there's another sovereign over all of that affairs, and they're watching, and they will step in. He will step in when he's ready. All right, and this is what he's saying here. All right, he's watching over them, and he's gonna come and he judges speedily. All right, and we went into monarchy of God once again, heaven's mandate. All right, he dealt with Israel one-on-one, sending angels, messengers, anointing, telling them who their king's going to be. He never did that with the other nations. The other nations, we learned through heaven's mandate, learned through nature. All right, so when they put someone in place, something not happening drastically to that country or people or that king shows God's agreement. And that's how they came up with heaven's mandate. And this is what it shows us here, that speedily disasters, this and that was happening. This is an example of heaven's mandate written in the scripture. Anyone could go look this up. This is what countries did. We went out to secular history and all of those stuff, all right, to show you countries outside of Israel know about the heaven's mandate. This is how they set up their governments, their laws, their kings, all of that. All right. So the Most High judges these sovereigns. So these sovereigns are not really sovereign. No one's judging the Most High. But what we people have to understand is that Most High judges those people who are doing whatever they want. So right now, the government would be in a sovereign type of position. People don't have to worry about that because they're not the real sovereign, as we went to the scriptures. You know what? Let me go revisit that.
The book of 1 Timothy chapter 6, starting at the 15th verse, which in his times he shall show who is the blessed and only potentate, the King of kings and Lord of lords, who only hath immortality, dwelling in the light which no man can approach unto, whom no man hath seen, nor can see, to whom be honor and power everlasting. So be it.
All right. So even though there's sovereigns in the earth and God bestowed that, when you really look deep and down, they're not sovereign because God is judging them. All right? Sovereign, no one could judge you. All right, and God is able to judge them. So this is why the scripture is saying He is the only true sovereign. He's the one that could be only sovereign, because to be sovereign means you can't be judged by somebody else. All right, but no, everybody else in this world can be. All right, because they're not under Him. All right, everyone's under the Most High. All right, so going back now. All right, so this same sovereignty, the sovereignty of God, all right, in His relationship to people and Him doing whatever He will and doing whatever He pleases, whether that be how He created you, whether He made you an unbeliever or whatever, everything He did it to His pleasure. All right. And we went into that some of these things, there's no second nature about it. So there's no second reason about it. So first of all, He created the world and He created His Son and everything's going to Him. Everything else just intertwines with that. So things that happen doesn't really have a second meaning or anything. It's just, the first one was Christ was created and that's in a response to that. There's no particular, this book drop and let me look into the meaning. There's none of that. That just in the matrix with what happened. All right, that's what some of the stuff was showing last week. All right, so we're going to go into West Encyclopedia of American Law and show you the definition of sovereignty.
This is out of the West Encyclopedia of American Law, edition 2. Sovereignty: the supreme, absolute, and uncontrollable power by which an independent state is governed and from which all specific political powers are derived. The intentional independence of a state, combined with the right and power of regulating its internal affairs without foreign interference.
All right, so it shows the supreme, absolute, uncontrollable power, all right, by which an independent state is governed and from which all specific political powers are derived. All right, the intentional independence of a state. All right, combined with the right and power of regulating its own internal affairs without foreign interference. All right, so nobody can come and tell God what He's doing. Why did He create this? Why did He do this? Why did He do that? And the only way people can really understand God, and this is why we're doing this lesson, is to understand him from a sovereign standpoint. And a lot of people don't even know what a sovereign is, what it does, or anything like that. All right. And if you don't know what that is, then you cannot understand how God operates and his character and his nature. All right, continue for us.
Sovereignty is the power of a state to do everything necessary to govern itself, such as making, executing, and applying laws, imposing and collecting taxes, making war and peace, and forming treaties or engaging in commerce with foreign nations.
All right, so sovereignty, once again, is the power of a state to do everything necessary to govern itself. All right, so whatever it needs to do to govern itself, it's able to do that. Making, executing, applying laws. All right, imposing, collecting taxes. Making war, making peace. All right, that's a sovereign right to do. Everyone has a right to who you want to be peaceful with and who you want to war with. All right, forming treaties or engaging in commerce with foreign nations. All right, you have the right to deal with all of that. All of that wraps up sovereignty of God. All right, continue.
The individual states of the United States do not possess the powers of external sovereignty, such as the right to deport undesirable persons, but each does have certain attributes of internal sovereignty, such as the power to regulate the acquisition and transfer of property within its borders. The sovereignty of a state is determined with reference to the U.S. Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land.
All right, so it then goes, because once again, we're going from on high, we're going how it goes from God. All right, we went down to the king. Now we're going down now to this structure now here, all right, the democratic structure, the republic structure. All right, and we're seeing now that the states, all right, the country has its sovereignty, so it's sovereign, all right, but then there's bodies within it. So the states, it's different sovereign bodies. So each state is like an individual, all right, but it's showing you these states, which are like individuals under the massive head, which would be the whole country. It's not sovereign. It has to answer to the top, which that they call that federal. All right, so federal could do whatever it wants, but what it's doing is based on the Constitution, all right, and God's laws, all right. Those who are under it, they can't do whatever they want, but it's like God doesn't see everything sometimes, so they can do, and then it has to step in and interfere, or somebody has to point out the supreme law, mentioning God's law, and then it's respected. But the states, they can't do whatever they want to do. They're not sovereign within themselves, all right, whether that be states or over here, provinces. All right, and it shows you they have the right, all right, they have the right to, they don't have the right to deport undesirable persons, all right? So they're not going to kick somebody out of the state and deport them out of the state, all right? But this is why people run to another state, because they're like, yo, they're not going to kick me out of the country, so I'll just run to a next place. You get what I'm saying? And then that next place has to communicate with the other next place. So people kind of understand that these are different bodies of people, and this is why they start to hide amongst different places, because you can't be in this body. This body knows you too well. You got to go somewhere else where they're unfamiliar with you, all right, and hide among there. And then one independent or one body is going to be communicating to another body to be looking for the individual, all right. But now to get the person out the whole place, they now have to go to the true sovereign, which is the federal of the land. All right. Was that it? Yeah, that was it. All right. So we're to go to the definition of monarchy. All right. So we went to and we showed God's sovereignty. We went and we showed how he transferred that to kings. We then went and showed how that's now transferred to different countries as independent bodies, sovereigns. All right. But also, this same thing is extended to the church. All right. This is where it's first coming from. All right. So we're going to go to the definition of monarchy.
The etymology for monarchy, which is a noun, mid 14th century, monarchy, quote, a kingdom, territory ruled by a monarch, end quote, late 14th century, quote, ruled by one person with supreme power, end quote, from Old French, monarchy, quote, sovereignty, absolute power, end quote. 13th century, from late Latin, monarchia, from Greek, monarchia, quote, absolute rule, end quote, literally, quote, ruling of one, end quote, from monos, meaning alone, from pi, root men, quote, small, isolated, end quote, plus archean, quote, to rule, end quote, see archon, meaning, quote, formed from government in which supreme power is in the hands of a monarch, end quote, is from early 15th century.
All right. So monarchy, all right, is a kingdom, a territory ruled by a monarch. All right. And the emphasis of this is rule by one person with supreme power. All right. So one person has absolute supreme power. All right. From Old French monarchy. All right. Sovereignty, absolute power. All right. Meaning form of government in which supreme power is in the hands of a monarch. All right. So once again, just to show people, the kings had that. They had they were monarchs. And now if you have a place that doesn't have a king, who's the monarch? All right. Is the country or the people. All right. So in America, that's what they tell you. The people have supreme power. All right. The administrators of the country operate, all right, with consent of the people to use that supreme power. But supreme power rests in the people in that structure. All right. In Canada, that supreme power rests in the Queen's hands. All right. That supreme power belongs to her. She is the monarch. All right. So we're going to go to the book called Behemoth, or the Long Parliament Dialogue. All right. And it's by Thomas Hobbes. All right. So we went through one about Leviathan before. We're going to go through about Behemoth. We're going to go into a little emphasis on the church and its monarchy, because a lot of people don't understand that the church is the first place where this is happening from, all right, before it's reaching out to king, civil, all of that. All right, but continue.
Behemoth, or the Long Parliament Dialogue, by Thomas Hobbes. Is not a Christian king as much a bishop now as the heathen kings were of old? For among the episcopus was a name common to all kings. Is not he a bishop now, to whom God had committed the charge of all the souls of his subjects, both of the laity and the clergy?
All right, so is not a Christian king as much a bishop now as the heathen kings were of old. All right, so Christian kings are bishops. All right, bishops are kings. All right, whom God has committed the charge of all souls of his subjects. So this is for even people in the community. People have to understand that you're in a community that's dealing with monarchy. All right. When it comes to your soul is really under the hands of the church. Okay. But the church loves you, so we deal and extend, and we're always going to be lenient with you. So we're not going to go and enforce that type of monarchy. Because once again, going back to the monarchy lesson, God chooses people with a good heart to put in that place. He is the person that could go into anyone's heart, and whoever he chose, they have the best heart that's out there. We went into the example. He searched the land and found the person that you need for the job. All right, whether people understand it or not, because he's the one searching deep down within. All right, so people, the same way monarchy happens, the same way kingship happens in the church, your soul is under the hand of the supreme power. All right. Continue.
And though he be in relation to our Savior, who is the chief pastor, but a sheep, yet compared to his own subjects, they are all sheep, both laic and cleric, and he only shepherd. And seeing a Christian bishop is but a Christian endued with power to govern the rest clergy, it follows that every Christian king is not only a bishop, but an archbishop, and his old dominion his diocese.
All right. So they show you how this is first coming from the bishop and then extends out to kings, and their stuff is in contrast to how the church is set up. That's what it's showing you. It's not the other opposite way that, oh, their stuff is set up like how the church is set up. No, your stuff is set up like the archdiocese and the archbishop. Okay? So that setup will be like, once again, so it's all sovereignty. All right? So the archbishop, that's the supreme sovereign power. The bishops, they have sovereign power, just like how God bestows to the kings, and they have their own reigns or dominions, places that they would be reigning with their sovereign power. All right, but they wouldn't really have the full sovereign power, because once again, God is setting up a system like his. We always see that there's one who has that full supreme one, like God. All right, but then he extends out other sovereigns under that. All right, so this is how the Most High is building everything down here. All right. So, and though he be in relation to our Savior, who is the chief pastor. All right. So, yes, Christ is the chief pastor. Christ is the real sovereign. All right. So, don't go and people want to mention that. Yes, we already know that. All right. And just a sheep. All right. But compared to the subjects that are under us, we're sovereigns and governors over them. All right. They are all sheep, both laic and cleric, and he only the shepherd. All right. Continue.
And though it were granted that imposition of hands is necessary from a priest, yet, seeing kings have the government of the clergy that are his subjects even before baptism, the baptism itself, wherein he is received as a Christian, is a sufficient imposition of hands, so that whereas before he was a bishop, now he is a Christian bishop.
All right, so they show you that a king can't even be a king while him being crowned by the archbishop. How did the queen become queen? An archbishop came to her and said, "You're the queen now," okay, and anointed her. So it showed you the transference that this is first and foremost, that power that you see rests in the church. And this is why you see God didn't give this to what a lot of churches outside. They don't understand this, all right? God is not within these churches. That's why they don't have a representation of his power structure set up, all right? So we have many Israelite churches out there. There's no church that's set up like how we're setting up a church, where we have archbishop, bishops. We understand the construct of God's world and how it operates, all right? So this is why we set up things like this now, because people who have been watching us, seeing us, hey, they start tuning in. They're like, oh, there's an archbishop now, there's bishop now. What's going on? This is what's happening. You're seeing a structure set up. Like God.
You don't want order?
Okay? Yes. They're just used to seeing a pastor ahead, and this is what people don't understand. All right, yes, he's head, but that's not that pastor is not a representation of God. The archbishop is a representation of God. All right, that's why that pastor doesn't have any understanding. That's how come that pastor does not have any son-in-law, anything like that. All right, because he is not in representation of the Most High. Okay, so he's not gonna have that. So you go to a church, no, God's not in there. How? There's definitely God's not in there. We know God's not in there. How? Our archbishop is not in there. This is what comes. We know, even when you look at God passed through these places, passed through the Anglican Church, passed through the Catholic Church. How do we know that? They have that set up in construct. All right, you don't have that set up in construct, God didn't come through you. It's not.
It's simple.
It's simple. You say something?
No, I was just saying, this crossed my mind. I'm wondering if people try to, avert or divert from those particular titles. I'm wondering if they believe this because it's attached to the Catholic Church.
Yeah,
Is that what it is?
You would, because that's the only place you're really hearing those two type of things.
Yeah.
Right, and the Anglican Church, but a lot of people don't even know about the Anglican Church.
Yeah, because the one that I remember that you hear bishop attached to their name would be Mr. Long. That's no longer amongst the land of the living.
But outside of that, you don't really hear anybody making mention of them as a bishop and they're Christian like that. At least I don't.
An example would be
The Pentecost, yeah, I never had it. It was just pastors that we had. That was
an
Pentecostal.
example is in with David being anointed by Samuel. Remember that? And 1 Samuel 16 and 12, 13, I should say.
It's 1 Samuel chapter 16, starting at the 12th verse. And he sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy and withal of a beautiful countenance and goodly to look to. And the Lord said, Arise, anoint him, for this is he. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brethren. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel rose up and went to Ramah.
All right. So Samuel, God's choosing once again, and he said, "This is him, anoint him." All right, and he does it through the prophet. All right. This is who God, the spiritual person has to be the one that's bringing in that civil person into authority. All right, because this is the higher realm. You ain't getting that transference of power. How are you getting that? You got to get it from God. God's not coming down and giving it to you. He has a representation down here who's transferring it down to you because he transferred it to that representation. All right, it's like tag.
And after being anointed, the Spirit came up.
And the Spirit comes on them. All right. So in the Old Testament, they had the oil. All right. This is understanding. So it's understanding. So there's no difference. If you go back to the videos, we didn't have this. We didn't have this set up or nothing. There's a time that came where the understanding came, and now we have that set up. All right. That means the Spirit of wisdom is here. All right. That's how you get this. There's no other way you can become an archbishop other than what? You got anointed. All right. This is because they're anointing the king. Okay, so they got anointed. This is how you get this understanding. Nobody can take this from you because guess what? This understanding, God doesn't give it to everybody. All right? This is evidence. This is the only evidence you need. Go out there and look in there. Go out there and ask them. They don't have the comprehension and understanding on that type of setup construct. All right? The Spirit of wisdom did not come upon them. All right? These are key things to take in. All right. So once again, kings have the government of a clergy. So their government is copying ours. When you're looking at their stuff, their government is in contrast to our government. They're copying us, not the other way around. All right. And this is the understanding we have to develop. All right. That what we have, that's what they're copying. That supreme power they have, transferring from here to there. It doesn't come from here to here and ours is minor than theirs. That's not how the world operates. All right, we're going to go to Romans 1:20.
Romans chapter 1 verse 20. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse.
So you can't say you don't know God, you don't know this. When he created archbishop, king, government, federal government, you know how those operate, you know how God operates. You deal with them all the time. Well, maybe not the archbishop and the thing, where you deal with the government. That's why you have that over you. You know you can't say something to them. Try to say something to them, you're going to be running. All right? So God made archbishops, kings, a federal government. Anything with supreme power is in contrast to God, all right? And it's created to show you how God operates, all right? When somebody is an owner, that is in contrast to God, all right? Because they have all rights over whatever it is that they have. Not everybody can be an owner. This is what the world's going to. Everybody wants to be these things, and that's not the way the world works. They want to be gods, right? This is what Eve wanted them to think. Satan was telling me, oh, you could be a god. I can show you, right? People are thinking that they could go and be gods, and this is why they want to set up. The next term that came out, everyone want to be a boss. This is everyone wants to be their own governor. This is what's happening in the world. A boss is in contrast. I was looking at the other day, I'm like, boss is a god too. Because guess what? God has angels. The boss has assistants. He has a whole dominion he's in control over. Anyone who has full ownership over a whole dominion, messengers, assistants, anything like that's a God. You're in contrast to that. That's the same power and likeness of God. Right? So everybody wants to be like God. When somebody says, I want my own creative control, you don't have the right to just own you don't wake up and own everything you want. That's what we're figuring out. That, you know what? We don't own everything. Guess why? Because we're not God. You know what I'm saying? This is a simple principle. You're not God. You don't have the authority or right. You don't directly must own something, because you, to own that, have to be in contrast some way to God.
You know, that just goes back into understanding. And if you don't understand something, how would you know how to work or use it?
Yeah.
You lack the understanding. Just kind of going back into a lot of people and their finances, and where they have like custody companies out there where it's like, as the bank, as well as crypto, where it's like, come bring it here, bring your business, we'll take care of it for you.
So I guess going back to that scripture when Christ says ye are gods, it wasn't for everybody, was it?
He's speaking to specific people, you know what I'm saying? But that's what people are thinking. First of all, when he says you're made, this is the one that people get, they like to go to Genesis. Man was made in God's image. Adam was made in God's image. Before he sinned, when he fell, he's no longer in God's image because God has no sin in him. Okay? So you're not in God's image. Nobody's in God's image until you return to Christ, who's God's image. But this is what people think, that they're made in God's image. We're made in the image of God. God's a sinner? God has sin within them? God has that? No. God showed you Adam before that happened. That's the image of God.
I couldn't wear this shirt before Christ.
Yes. Give us the law dictionary adapted Constitution and Laws of the United States by John Bouvier definition of sovereignty. All right, so this is the John Bouvier Constitution and Laws of the United States by John Bouvier, his law dictionary on sovereignty.
A law dictionary adapted to the Constitution and Laws of the United States by John Bouvier, published in 1856. Sovereignty: the union and exercise of all human power possessed in a state. It is a combination of all power. It is the power to do everything in a state without accountability.
All right, so it is the union and exercise of all human power possessed in a state. It is a combination of all power. It is the power to do everything in a state without accountability. All right, so once again, we're showing the contrast. Even if we're going to relate this to the church, people have to understand we're not going to do that once again, because God chooses someone with a good heart that they're thinking about all of this. They're thinking about the Most High, all of that. All right, but when it comes to how we're operating, people have to see this from a sovereign standpoint. All right, you don't ask questions to God. You don't ask questions to the king. You don't ask questions to the people in the church. But you can. Because why? God gave us a heart. But naturally, any other people outside you go to, they wouldn't allow you to do that. So that is a very great deal of, respect that a sovereign's giving you when they're allowing you to do that.
Good example there, because in other churches or camps out there, when it comes to how they're operating and what they're running, it's like, if you don't like it, leave. We're not taking no questions of that nature. If you disagree with something, leave. Go build your own church. Get out of here. Go sit down and learn. Face the front.
The funny thing is, we understood the concept of that sovereignty, because most people don't. So what they try to do is they try to interrupt that state now. So they're like, all right, that person doing this, we're going to hijack the church. Do this, do that. Because they're like, this person don't have the right to do it, so you're attacking it. We're like, okay, you know what? This is your realm. It is theirs. Who else's is it? You can do what you want in your own stuff. Who the hell am I? You get what I'm saying? This understanding was there. What do we have to do? We have to make our own realm, have our own sovereignty. This is what we decided to do. Because they're right. We don't control you. Why am I trying to go in here, tackle you? You're the sovereign of your thing. You created it. I was not there when you developed it. It's yours. You have the right to do that. You're in your jurisdiction. Guess what we doing? Out of your jurisdiction. Okay? That's the only way you can do it. When somebody is going now and doing things in that jurisdiction that doesn't belong, that is a disrespect even to God. That's what comes it's the best to just go.
Well,
made mention earlier in regards to the setup of a sovereign church and how there's bishops and archbishops, right? I was thinking because there's a lot of church that is set up under government and not set up like how the Catholics or the Anglican church would be set up, which is not under the government. If you get what I'm saying. So I just wanted to make that mention there as well.
Oh yeah. So that would be kind of like a constitutional monarchy, but it would be opposite because okay, the church has a constitution and stuff, but they've allowed a monarch, another entity, to be over them. So Canada's their own; they're doing their own thing, but they said they're incorporated with the Queen, and the Queen has really the control over them, right? So that's what that church would be doing. So they're in control, but then they're saying here in their paperwork, the government's really over us. All right, like we're gonna make the laws or whatever, but the government's over us. Like when you're really looking at the paperwork, right? Which that's what comes down. God's like, wait a minute, I made you in relation to me, and now you're giving that sovereignty to somebody else. What kind of madness is that? That's a direct disrespect to God. You're giving your sovereign power that God bestowed on you to be a representation of Him, and you're giving it to somebody else willingly to be over you.
And when you look at it, going back into elected officials, knowing that Christ chose us, right? We never chose Him. When it comes to those that are in positions or in high places, it's basically sinners voting other sinners into power. And a lot of them don't care about God.
Your sovereignty, the union and exercise of all human power possessed in a state. It is a combination of all power. It is the power to do everything in a state without accountability, to make laws, to execute and to apply them, to impose and collect taxes and levy contributions, to make war or peace, to form treaties of alliance or of commerce with foreign nations, and the like. 2. Abstractly, sovereignty resides in the body of the nation and belongs to the people, but these powers are generally exercised by delegation.
All right, so delegation, this is a big word right here. All right, so in the states, the people have power and they delegate it to Congress. They delegate it to the judge. But the states, people in the United States realize, and this is what a lot of people don't really are comprehending, the people inside of the contract, it says, you have the full power. You only delegate that to these administrative authorities. And they know this. People could demolish that within it because they are the, imagine, people are the one with God's supreme power in their hand. In America, they have that right. At any time you can be like, you know what, I'm not dealing with that kind, and you're now have that supreme power in your hand. But people over there definitely don't know how to use it. So continue.
Number 3, when analyzed, sovereignty is naturally divided into 3 great powers, namely the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. The first is the power to make new laws and to correct and repeal the old. The second is the power to execute the laws both at home and abroad. And the last is the power to apply the laws to particular facts, to judge the disputes which arise among the citizens, and to punish crimes.
All right, so when analyzed, sovereignty is naturally divided into 3 great powers. Legislative, all right, so they're writing the Constitution to this. They have power for anything of that, all right? The executive and the judiciary. The first is the power to make new laws and to correct and repeal the old. We see this through the Old Covenant.
So a judge is not a sovereign as well? A
Would-
judge.
Would a judge be a sovereign as well?
Well, covered under that.
Well, in that room, that courtroom, yes, they would be.
Okay.
All right, within that courtroom that they're in at that moment. But they're not outside. They just have delegated power. So they don't walk around with that power. It's like when they come in that room, that's the one time the power comes on them. Like, you know what I
They
mean?
put on the uniform.
Yeah.
Put on the-
Yeah. And then when they leave out, they're not that. Archbishop, we have that power
all the time.
all the time. All right. They only have it as a special privilege because you need to do this job real quick.
They could break some laws even if a jury basically came back and somebody's guilty. They could basically say that with the evidence could say that that person not guilty or whatever.
That's why there's a lot of power in the hand of a judge. And if you have the judge in your pocket, there's a lot of wickedness going on. All right. But legislative. All right. So they have the power to repeal and to make new laws and correct and to repeal the old ones. All right, to make new laws, to correct and to repeal the old ones. And we see this happen in the Old Testament where God's like, okay, give Israel a law. He's like, you know what? Take that back here, write a next one for them. You get what I'm saying? And then he's like, you know what? Screw that one. He has the power. So people that don't still use that power. So you have the power to dissolve, remake, do all of that. People are just not doing that. All right. So God's like, he kept what? Making new legislative laws and covenants. Because he has that power. That power is invested in him to do so. So he can make a new one, change one, do this one. This is why people are like, yo, how come they keep changing and God keep doing this? And he's the power. He holds the Constitution in his hand. He could amend, repeal, do whatever he wants. All right. The sovereign has that authority to do that. All right. And this is the character of God. This is how Christ operates, how the Most High operate, how the Father and the Son both operate. All right. In unison. And then pass it on to the archbishop, pass it on to the kings, and then lastly, down to civil authorities.
So even the archbishop is going on king. So.
Yes, because he's the one that anointed them. They had to come to him like, hey, can you anoint me?
That's what the priest I was talking about the church.
All right, so the queen, she's a Christian. So this is why we start to understand, okay, she understands this. That's how she got into this, position. That's how she got here. So continue for us.
Number 4, strictly speaking, in our republican forms of government, the absolute sovereignty of the nation is in the people of the nation, and the residuary sovereignty of each state, not granted to any of its public functionaries, is in the people of the state.
All right. Well, so lucky. So going back to the second one. All right. The second power is the power to execute laws both at home and abroad. So once again, you have sovereign power. This is what we're telling people. You're a part of the church. You're a part of this. Understand. For those within, have your things. When we make a law, when I make a law, okay, and the church makes a law, that law extends from here, this room, till you go outside. This is where the religious exemption for something is worded. This is where all of that's happening. All right? This is how the system operates. People can deny it, and people deny it because they don't really see it working in front of them. All right? But if we're going to go to something on record, they're going to have this understanding as long as you can communicate this to them in a fluent way. Fluent and respectful way. All right, but any law we make and we can show, once again, to have a law, we know outside you gotta have what? Your constitution on you, you have to have your things, you have to show them the citations, you have to show them where is this? You can't just say you made the law and you're following it. Where's the citation? Where is it at? You have a law, we make a law, and we give you document with the law on it. This extends from this room outside to where you're at your bed, wherever you go to a next country. This is how sovereignty works. You're allowed to take that with you into other places. All right? So you're allowed to extend that anywhere you go, whether outside or abroad. All right, so for the Most High, I don't know what he would need sovereign thing to go. I don't know, maybe there isn't it. If we're looking at it, that could be someone's question. Is there other nations, galaxies? I don't know, but the way sovereignty is, they say you have sovereignty when you go abroad. All right, I don't know where abroad going, where God's going. I don't know. Okay, but that's how sovereignty works. So that's a big mystery there, okay? Because that's a big key of sovereignty too, that I can take this and extend to a region.
Where does God not go? Or where does he not exist?
Yeah. All right. And let's see. The power to apply the laws to particular facts, to judge disputes which arise among the citizens, and to punish crimes. All right. So once again, the sovereignty also extends to you have the right to apply the laws to particular facts. All right. So if we're seeing and we're like, yo, that thing in my law says I have that. That's mine. That's mine, according to the law. Okay? Yeah, that's how the law operates. We kind of have to understand, because people are like, oh, can this system do something about this? Or can this people do something about this? Like, no, if you have a law in your thing and you're pointing it out and do whatever, you have right to execute and do whatever you need. This is normal relationship with people and jurisdictions and understanding. This is common understanding for folks.
So basically, you're saying the same way they use legalese to trick us,
Mm-hmm.
we can flip it on them,
Of course, definitely.
right? Because God's Father's laws, all these laws are based on His laws.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good point there. Just going back into understanding, because a lot of people, they don't understand legalese.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And if they swear the Bible, then hey, that's my Father's book.
I'm the runner. I run the show here, according to it.
That's what they ask you, either to let a yes be yes or swear the Bible.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yes.
Yeah, I was just watching, not to go off here topic, but just there's a YouTube page that they deal with criminal psychology, and there was a woman in Markham, that's a place in Ontario, north of where we're currently located right now. And while they were taking it was just a statement from her, because she was in the house when her parents got shot, and they had the Bible right there. They're like, "You want to put your hand on the Bible?" So the Bible was right in there. It wasn't even in the courtroom. They had it at the police station too.
Yeah.
So, the power to apply the same laws, all right, to particular facts that you're like, yo, this is a fact. To judge disputes which arise among the citizens and to punish crimes. All right, so if a dispute happens and you're like, yo, such and such, and you're like, yo, that get taken away from that person, and we have you as you're down in the community, you ain't gonna be able to go to Toronto police and this and that and tell them, oh, this person could. When they're gonna look at like, you're a part of the community, you're a part of the thing, you agreed to be what? You agreed to be and came baptized, you're a baptized member, that means you're under their authority. All right? They just judged the matter, the judgment went out, there's no one you could run to. That jurisdiction is gonna respect it. All right? As long as we're not trying to hurt you. If we're trying to hurt you, then they'll give you immunity in your jurisdiction. Like, all right, we'll hide you in here. And try to, all right, big dog, like, okay, this person's hiding, you want to fight them, we know you were able to, but we're hiding them, let me and you duke it out. All right, but me and you have a good relationship, so you're like, all right, I don't really want to do that, and this is how people run into other countries.
Yeah, speaking about that, there was a athlete, a sprinter from Belarus, I guess on social media, she was criticizing her coaches, and they basically were trying to shut her down and make her go back home immediately. And I was told to her that if she comes back home, her life's gonna be in danger. Mm-hmm. So now she ended up going over into Poland right now, and that's where she currently is, like, seeking refuge.
The book of 1 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 1 out of the KJV. Dare any of you, having a matter against another, go to law before the unjust and not before the saints? Do ye not know that the saints shall judge the world? And if the world shall be judged by you, are ye unworthy to judge the smallest matters? Know ye not that we shall judge angels? How much more things that pertain to this life? If ye have judgments of things pertaining to this life, set them to judge who are least esteemed in the church.
No, we stop there. All right. All right, so it shows that we actually go to the verse 5 too.
Verse 5, I speak to your shame. Is it so that there is not a wise man among you? No, not one that shall be able to judge between his brethren. But brother goeth to law with brother, and that before the unbelievers.
All right. So he's showing that, we have the judgment system. So first he's like, there's no wise man among you. Because first of all, for you to even have such a structure, you're going to have somebody who got that smarts there, an archbishop or something has to be there. Where you're like, you have this type of setup, anything like that. To even understand that you could judge and do this and do that. And then you're like, wait, because this is speaking about real court matters. So like you're going to go to the court judge to judge this? You're gonna go to the
The sinners?
the city hall? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what are you doing? Like, when we have judicial power within the court, we judge angels. All right. So once again, extending that sovereignty. All right. We have judicial power to execute and deal with our laws amongst ourselves, with the people amongst us. Have that respected when you go out towards abroad. And this is why we're saying religious exemptions, this and that, because we're showing this is your law, this is what it is. They have to respect you when you're going into a next realm. All right. And we're going to have to start honing down on this, having as much documentation in this, because Satan's good. By the only way you could defeat truth is by trying to hide the truth. So if they don't have I don't know, then how can the truth work? We have to get documentation, this, that, build the truth back to show this is the truth. Once truth is seen, comprehended, can it be denied? All right. All right, so strictly speaking, the Republican forms of government, the absolute sovereignty of the nation is in the people of the nation. So like I told you, in a Republican, the absolute sovereignty that we're talking about with God, imagine that in America, is in the people. If I was in America right now, I don't know what I'd probably do, because I'm like, yo, you know what this thing is saying right now? It's saying, I have God's power. You don't even have to be a archbishop, nothing. They done gave you the power over there as a citizen. This is
The way saying sovereign citizen.
Yeah. So we're gonna go to sovereign immunity. All right. So what is sovereign immunity? All right. So we've been kind of touching on it a little, on how a nation who's sovereign and they make laws and they do this, how they're able to do and exercise certain things by having immunity to do so. Right. But we're gonna go into an extensive understanding on this. So this is out the legal dictionary. All right, just freedictionary.com.
Sovereign immunity. The legal protection that prevents a sovereign state or person from being sued without consent.
All right, so a legal protection that prevents a sovereign state or person from being sued without consent. All right, so this is a kind of first thing, and I'm like going over this, I'm like, you kind of have to understand this principle to understand how you can even attack a system. Because remember, it's sovereign. You get what I'm saying? I think we forgot that, yo, wait a minute, they're sovereign. You know what I'm saying? If you're in their realm, they can do such and such and this and that. All right, so there's certain ways you have to operate.
So maybe that's what we need to start putting on them. If you basically go against my rights, I'm gonna sue you and your company basically at the end of the day.
No, this is saying the opposite. You can't sue them.
You can sue like
Can't without.
like when you okay. Let's walk into a store and they say, "Oh, you need your mask." You basically say, "Oh, if you go against my right or my beliefs, I can sue you because you're going against my beliefs or my rights."
Oh yeah. You could do that to a store outside. This is talking about the government.
No, I was talking about.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. No, so the other people, you could definitely sue them for things like that. But the government, this is what it's showing, they have sovereign immunity when it comes to being sued without their consent. So I don't even understand how that happens, right? Because I have to give you permission to sue me. All right, but continue.
Sovereign immunity is a judicial doctrine that prevents the government or its political subdivisions, departments, and agencies from being sued without its consent.
All right, so understanding sovereign immunity, a judicial doctrine. So this is a judicial doctrine that prevents the government or its political subdivision, departments, agencies from being sued without its consent. All right, this is interesting because when we're seeing the Catholic churches and stuff, and when they're going through their their rape stuff or their things of that nature, I'm wondering how these people are able to sue them. But obviously they're using a lot of TV, a lot of things where they're like, yo, you go outside every day, like the world is not just based on inner standing, it's on outer standing. So if people see you do and don't do these things, there will be a certain understanding there that they can use and make your image even worse. So they're like, they don't want to battle, they don't want to do this, it goes out to pay. And paying, once you're paying, it's seeming like you're guilty, you're just giving a guilty thing, and people are like, yo, the person gave money. Right? Even if you're just saying, yo, I don't want any problems and I have enough money, we don't want to go into the ringer, I don't want to go through 5 years of this. What is it that you want to just, end whatever this is? Because I know that you don't even really want to do this. It has to be for this. And they're like, yo, I want it for this and that. And you're like, all right, give it to them.
That's what you want.
But people on the outside, like, yo, the bad pain. You get what I'm saying? So it's hard to decipher and things like that. All right. But it has to be that they're doing for them to be able to get sued by their own community member when they're sovereign. All right, we'll continue.
The doctrine stems from the ancient English principle that the monarch can do no wrong.
All right, so the monarch can do no wrong. So people have to understand that from a king's standpoint, government standpoint, church standpoint, God's standpoint. First of all, God can do no wrong. People want to always pass God. So God, this is the first thing people want to do. When you're trying to bring about rights and wrong, they're like, so God made the devil? So God made the devil. Because, so does God control the devil? They're going to try and trap you with that. So what they do, God's a bad person. God's this. This is what they're trying to trap you in to bring around. All right. They understand sovereignty. Guess what? I don't care what you're saying. How can he do no wrong when he can do whatever he wants? He doesn't have any right to do anything. He doesn't have to do that. A next key thing about sovereignty, and I touched on it last week, about people being wretched in poor states. All right? This is how God operates. Everyone's in a wretched, poor state when you're dealing with God. This is how it operates in sovereignty. If you're not a part of the kingdom of that sovereignty, outside of that is many poor, down people who's trying to come up to that status that you see. That's how God has it. All right, so majority of the people who's going to be under these communities of sovereigns, they're going to be lower education, obviously, because the sovereign has the highest education. God gave him that. For him to control the other people, they can't have as much education. All right, because they're going to start going and trying to overthrow and do this and do such and such. Or they might have that and he put you as a legal counsel or something for him. All right, so this is how it operates.
I don't think people really understand that everything is governed by law.
Mm-hmm.
And I always go back and say that God is law. He's not governed by law. He is law.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has dimensions or blueprints before it's actually built, and including us too as well. Everything is governed by law, but God is law, so He's not governed by anything. He is the law.
He is the absolute law.
So everything that he does is right.
Everything that he does is right. Nothing can be wrong.
To no rules.
Because He's not bound to no law.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? And this is now on all supreme sovereignty.
This is suits against the United States. In early American history, the courts supported the traditional view that the United States could not be sued without congressional authorization. Thus, for many years, those who had contract and tort claims against the government had no legal recourse except through the difficult, inconvenient, and often tardy means of convincing Congress to pass a special bill awarding compensation to the injured party on a case-by-case basis.
All right. Wow. Just got a revelation. Why that's what even about?
Yeah.
The sovereign can do no wrong. And you're in America and you have absolute power. How can you be charged with anything? You can't do no wrong. That power is bestowed on the people. This is a great power. That just hit me like, how can you do wrong when that nation did? All right, this is why they have to bring you in the judicial system, all of this stuff, because if you're saying you're these people and you're owed these things, there's zero way they can tell you that you're doing something wrong now. When you're the sovereign, you're the one with the absolute power. All right, but once again, in American early history, the court supported the view that the United States cannot be sued without its consent. All right? So the view is that the United States could not be sued without congressional authorization. So first of all, congressional authorization first comes from the people. So the people can give the authority to sue the government as well. This is how it comes. It's very tricky when it comes to this sovereign thing, and the people have it now. And this is why the government's trying to operate a certain way. I don't even think people understand this sovereign immunity in the states where they are the people who have the power. They have the power.
Yeah, because now that you mention it, even as much as I laugh, I would say sovereign citizen is like an oxymoron, but they've actually given sovereignty to the citizens.
Yeah, this is a free nation. This is why people are running over here. That's a free
What's it, land
nation
of the
on
free?
down. That is all free. The way that's written, what I'm seeing, I'm just like, yo, wait a minute. How? You can't tie any of these people down. How?
If they don't have understanding.
Yeah.
That's
That's the only way. Yeah. All right. So for many years, all right, read that part. That's the dust part again.
Thus, for many years, those who had contract and tort claims against the government had no legal recourse except through the difficult, inconvenient, and often tardy means of convincing Congress to pass a special bill awarding compensation to the injured party on a case-by-case basis.
All right. So once again, no legal recourse except through the difficult, inconvenient, often tardy of convincing Congress to pass a special bill where they're in their heart, they're like, you know what? I did mess up, yo. We should, we should pay something out. That's the only way you're gonna get something passed. Because once again, they have to want to punish themselves. So continue.
The federal government first began to waive its sovereign immunity in areas of law other than torts. In 1855, Congress established the U.S. Court of Claims, a special court created to hear cases against the United States involving contracts based upon the Constitution, federal statutes, and federal regulations.
All right. So once again, they start opening up themselves to be, all right, let me be judged by you and punished by you. Imagine, and this is key to understand these courtrooms, the U.S. Court of Claims. So if you're going to try to claim somebody did something to you, the government did this to me, you need to go to the U.S. Court of Claims. All right. That's made to hear the cases against the United States involving contracts and the Constitution. All right, so the U.S. Court of Claims is for a special court created to hear cases against the United States dealing with contracts and the Constitution. All right, continue.
In 1887, Congress passed the Tucker Act to authorize federal district courts to hear contractual claims not exceeding $10,000 against the United States. Other special courts were later created for particular types of non-tort claims against the federal government. The U.S. Board of General Appraisers was created in 1890 and was replaced in 1926 by the U.S. Customs Court, and the U.S. Court of Custom Appeals was created in 1909 and then replaced in 1926 by the U.S. Court of Customs and Patent Appeals. These courts handled complaints about duties levied on imports. The Board of Tax Appeals, created in 1924 to handle internal revenue complaints, was replaced in 1942 by the Tax Court of the United States.
All right. We went through a lot there to show you, all right, that the United States government started opening up itself. And, didn't do extensive research to be like, why is there something going on? Why would they do that? Well, they start opening up themselves to be judged on certain matters. All right. And they start opening up these courtrooms and things where people could go and have these disputes to try to come against the sovereign. So I'm going through all this to show you that this is how much you can't go against a sovereign, that they have to choose that you can come against them. I don't think people understand that when it comes to government, especially when you're trying to go against the government. You have to have that in mind. We have to understand God, sovereignty, Christ, to get how these things all operate. All right, we're going to go to sovereign immunity. And it's also called crown immunity. And we're going to get a more understanding on that.
Sovereign immunity, or crown immunity, is a legal doctrine whereby a sovereign or state cannot commit a legal wrong and is immune from civil suit or criminal persecution, strictly speaking in modern text, in its own courts. A similar, stronger rule as regards foreign courts is named state immunity.
All right, so sovereign immunity or crown immunity is a legal doctrine whereby a sovereign or state cannot commit a legal wrong and is immune from civil suit or criminal prosecution, strictly speaking in modern texts, in its own courts. A similar rule as regards to foreign courts is named state immunity. All right, so when you're dealing with your own court, it's called sovereign immunity, crown immunity. No one's going to come against you in your own court. When you're going outside of that, they call it state immunity. All right, so you have an immunity in another state. All right, continue.
In its older sense, sovereign immunity is the original forebear of state immunity based on the classical concept of sovereignty, in the sense that a sovereign could not be subjected without his or her approval to the jurisdiction of another.
All right, so in its older sense, sovereign immunity is the original forebear of state immunity based on the classical concept of sovereignty, in the sense sovereign, all right, could not be subjected without his or her approval to the jurisdiction of another. So this is how God operates. God cannot, and we're showing this to show, because in order to understand how this realm operates, you have to understand how God operates, or else you're going to be angry at a lot of how a lot of things operate, because you don't respect sovereignty, you don't respect God, you don't respect authority, you don't respect supreme power. Therefore, when people see stuff happen, they're what? Offended. A lot of people right now in their hearts are offended at God. Offended. God made me do this. God put me through this. God put me through that. God making me go through this. Why God make things like that? Why God do me like that? Why God do that? And this is even worse for people who's gone through stuff. Accident, car, surgery, this, loss of part, loss of arm, born with a deformity, born some certain way. Imagine how much people have it up in their heart for God right now. There's a lot of people who have that in their heart, because we see, even being in this position, if people don't understand what's happening, guess what they are? Right away, they're offended. So imagine, people just don't want to say that to people, because people are like, yo, that's deep down inside of their own heart, with their own parent. They're not going to tell you that. But a lot of people, just on us knowing offense happens, they're offended with God. That's why they're not coming to the church. That's why they're not dealing with Him. That's not that they're looking at nothing. They're looking at the world, how things operate, and they're angry, they're pissed off. They're angry and they're pissed off. But God is a sovereign, so you can't just come on openly and say, I hate God. You can't do that. So that's held up deep inside the heart. All right, and it's emanated outside by how these individuals are operating. That's how we know they have it up for God.
Your vibration.
Yeah, and then when you start to ask them about certain things in the Bible, we're like, oh, but this and that, and they're always going to go to Satan, and why is this happening, and why is that, and why did you put this? Once again, the main thing why people can't understand God is sovereignty. Because if they did, then it's like God can do whatever He wants. So that's the first thing you're understanding. But from you don't understand that, then you're like, oh, you can't do whatever you want. That's what they're on. All right. Continue.
There are two forms of sovereign immunity. Immunity from suit, also known as immunity from jurisdiction or adjudication. Immunity from enforcement.
All right. Immunity from suit, also known as immunity from a jurisdiction or adjudication, or immunity from enforcement. All right. These are the immunities that one has under sovereign immunity. We have to remember these things and understand. Continue.
Immunity from suit means that neither a sovereign, head of state, or head of state in person, nor any in absentia or representative form, nor to a lesser extent the state, can be a defendant or subject of court proceedings, nor in most equivalent forms, such as under arbitration awards and tribunal awards or damages.
All right, so immunity, all right, from suit means that neither a sovereign / head of state in person or any abstentia or representation form can be a defendant or subject of court proceedings, nor in most equivalent forms such as under arbitration awards, tribunal awards, damages. All right, this is key for even the church, all right? Because once you're under the church, no one is able to judge you when you're under what? Based on you being baptized, you're under the authority of the bishops of the church. That's who you're under authority. So somebody outside is having a thing. We have to now have the understanding that, you know what? This person this person under me. I have to write to that authority to let them know that community member was baptized, their soul, their flesh, that's over here. Anything that you're saying to them needs to be said over here. And when we're understanding how the world operates, this is basic setup. They don't have jurisdiction over that. Over that church member. That church member has been tagged by God. Claimed by God. All right, continue.
Immunity from enforcement means that even if a person succeeds in any way against their sovereign or state, they and the judgment may find themselves without means of enforcement.
All right, so immunity from enforcement means that even if a person succeeds in any way against their sovereign or state, they and the judgment may find themselves without means of enforcement. There's no enforcement behind any of that. All right, continue.
Separation of powers or natural justice coupled with a political status other than a totalitarian state dictates there be broad exceptions to immunity, such as statutes where expressly bind the state, a prime example being constitutional laws and judicial review. Furthermore, sovereign immunity of a state entity may be waived. A state entity may waive its immunity by prior written agreement, instituting proceedings without claiming immunity, submitting to jurisdiction as a defendant in a suit.
All right, so once again, these are key things. Furthermore, sovereign immunity of a state may be waived. A state entity may waive its immunity by. You have to waive your own immunity if you're sovereign. No one's able to judge you. So if the church is sovereign, anything we're doing, that's us allowing that to be done. All right, because once again, no one is doing anything to God, and that's where sovereignty comes from. You're not doing anything to God, so you're not doing to anybody who's under that category. And that's the simple principle that the world deals with. The world understands God. The nations understand God. Countries understand God. Police departments, this and that, they all deal with sovereignty, jurisdiction, respecting powers, respecting supreme control, respecting when somebody controls a certain realm. This is how the world is based on. The whole world is based on these principles.
Yeah, just going back into law enforcement, I remember when I was younger and I was in, I think it was Richmond Hill, which that's York region. He was giving me a ride to Toronto region, and before he was able to go into that jurisdiction, he actually had to call back headquarters to get the authorization to go into that jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
So just even to cross like a 10-minute drive,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a different jurisdiction, they had to get the approval or authorization to do so.
All right. Many people understand this. All right. Continue.
Let me just go back to the topic. That's the way I read it. Furthermore, sovereign immunity of a state entity may be waived. A state entity may waive its immunity by prior written agreement, instituting proceedings without claiming immunity, submitting to jurisdiction as a defendant in a suit, intervening in or taking any steps in any suit other than for the purpose of claiming immunity. In constitutional monarchies, the sovereign is the historical origin of the authority which creates the courts. Thus, the courts had no power to compel the sovereign to be bound by them, as they were created by the sovereign for the protection of his or her subjects. This rule was commonly expressed by the popular legal maxim Rex non potest peccar, meaning, quote, the king can do no wrong, end quote.
All right, so the only way you can give up that immunity is by consent, prior written agreement, instituting proceedings without claiming an immunity. All right, submitting to a jurisdiction as a defendant in a suit. So this is key for those in the church. We're never gonna go and you're gonna be like, oh, I'm a defendant. No, you're not no defendant. All right, you're going there, special appearance. You're going to let them know that you're in another jurisdiction, the church, outline these things. All right. Intervening or taking any steps in any suit other than the purpose of claiming immunity. So you're not going to go into and start to continue a court case or this and that. The only reason why you're going anywhere with anybody to tell them that you're immune from that, because you're a part of the church and this is what you believe, the Constitution, all of these things is what you're a part of. That's the only reason why you're saying something when you're in the church to anybody else, because you're within your own jurisdiction. All right. In constitutional monarchies, once again, the sovereign is the historical origin and authority which creates the court. So this is what we're understanding. The queen created these courts. All right. They created these worlds. The courts have no power to compel the sovereign to be bound by them, as they are created by the sovereign for protection of his or her subjects. So the courts and the civil court is to protect the people because they're living amongst each other. So they had a law that governs them, that helps to keep some sort of level of control about, especially dealing with a bunch of non-believers who are not a part of a church who has a constitution where they wouldn't need a civil court or civil government. All right, and this is all based on the doctrine, once again, the non potest peccar, meaning the king can do no wrong. All right, the archbishop can do no wrong. The bishop can do no wrong. The queen can do no wrong. All right, even the governments outside, they can't really do no, because they're empowered to do this. They're within their sovereignty. They gotta get judged by the ultimate sovereign, and that's God. All right, so we went through a plethora today. All right, we went to showing you how, first and foremost, God passed that same sovereignty we spoke of last week, all right, where everybody's in their destitute, miserable, sinner state, and God has complete authority, control, directive. He's the one that's doing everything within that realm, all right? He can do whatever he can. He passed this same power now that we've been understanding. He transferred this to kings. He transferred this to the church. He transferred this to your government. Go to Romans 13. Is that 13 or 14? No, which one's the one with the government?
Romans 13, you're right.
13, yes. Romans 13. All right, and this is why we come to hear why it's going to say this. Because this is basic understanding. Before we're like, what the heck? I don't even know I went to this. Some people were quoting it. Even Hebrews do it, but they don't really understand what it means.
This is the book of Romans, chapter 13, verse 1. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God.
And let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. For there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained by God. Some people will be like, so do we have to do what the government says? Who did you get baptized by? Which government are you a part of? You, when you're going outside, you're just operating within another jurisdiction. You're part of the church. So when we're saying we're not going to follow that, that's because guess what? We have a government that we're following. Okay? You have somebody that is a monarch. All right, that's why you don't need to follow them. So if you don't want to follow over here, according to God, go outside and follow the civil authorities. That's why he put them out there for you. And this is why I'm going to the scripture, because a lot of people, they're giving us vaccines, but you are coming to church. When we were teaching about Essenes and all of that, where were you? Follow your authorities. Follow your peoples. That's why God has them out there. Follow them. Yes, you follow them. You who left, follow them. That's your God. That's who you need to follow. That's your authorities. That's your sovereign. You didn't want to be with us. You didn't want to be with the people with the heart. They didn't think this was coming to the world. You didn't think that was coming. You didn't think they were going to pressure you. All right? Now you're being pressured. Now guess what? You want to be under, I want an exemption. I want an exemption. Oh, you want to be under what? You want some sovereign immunity from the church to say that this act that you're doing is under the church and you can do it.
And then what they say this done with the papers and gone.
Now you want to follow us. Now that's why everyone, I get one, but they're not really seeing what they're doing. You didn't want to listen before. You didn't want to be under control before. But now government's hounding down on you. The scripture's saying you gotta follow somebody. The way this world operates, you gotta follow somebody. Even us right now, we're following Christ. You must follow somebody. You cannot be your own man. You need to be a part of a body. This is how God set it up. This is why he has the government. I can already see it, why we've been going through this. He set the governments up because guess what? If you were a part of a church, a real church, with an archbishop, bishops, archdeacons, province, then you wouldn't be a part of that mess. But because parents, foreparents, whatever happened, did not, this is why he's now cracking down. He's like, they didn't think it was coming. You joined their governments. You made it get big. You made it into this huge thing. Now it's coming for you.
You know, everybody should take into account that the scriptures make mention that as in the days of Noah, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. And we know that Noah was preparing and building because the storms were coming and the water was coming. And we know water is symbolic for the law. The law is coming for you people and you're going to get drowned by the law. And usually what happens, you get penalized by the law. So what, you're going to drown in debt. You're going to be stuck in your house. But also the law was the schoolmaster to bring you back to Christ. So for those that are running this way, come on, let's go. We're building the ark.
We've been preparing. When this came, we have everything on deck ready. We're ready. We've been ready. All right? So this is what we're seeing. You not following your authorities, God caught you. You went and followed them. You follow them now. This is what the scripture is saying. Let's go back to it. Romans 13:1.
Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisted the power, resisted the ordinance of God. And they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have praise of the same. For he is a minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid. For he beareth not the sword in vain, for he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil.
Yeah. Well, even before that, to execute wrath upon them that do evil. So when you see vaccines coming, people's like, oh, what's happening? Bare wickedness has been going on. This is God's retribution. I'm already seeing it. We're like, yo, people now, you didn't want to listen, you didn't want to deal with God's stuff, you went away from it, you signed up your businesses to other people, you gave away everything from God, so God took you out of his representation, anything that gives you that control, that protection from him, and then he took you out, and you took yourself out of the kingdom. All right, continue.
Verse 5, wherefore ye must needs be subject, not only for wrath, but also for conscience sake.
All right. So we just went to this to show that, the way God set up sovereignty, you have to follow your sovereign authority. This is a key principle because sovereignty is of God. And if you are breaking those key principles, you are disrespecting the image of God. You are disrespecting God's power and how he operates. He set these things up as representations of his power. So when people are going outside of these zones, they're going against God. These are going against God, even though God's not directly involved. And now I can understand what the scripture is saying that, you better follow the Canada. Because guess what? You're not part of no church. Many churches was out here. You could have found it. God would have made you get there. But you want to be a part of this system, this world. You get run by this world. How do we get here? We said we want to find God. We searched for God many years, many things. We know this is coming. But we said, we want to deal with God. However, wherever he is, we go stay here. Some days it's like, you don't even know what we're doing here. All right? But we staying here because we finding God. We believe. And God, boom, puts us in the kingdom. He's like, yo, guess what? You don't have to follow those authorities no more. And we're not doing it. We're not sitting. We're not going against them. God, we have our own jurisdiction. Because we follow God. We said we want to follow his laws. We understand his laws stand to a constitution, a this, a that, all of these things. Well, we're within our own zone. This is the benefit of dealing with God. People don't understand that, and that's how they wind it up in these realms now, where now you're getting that punishment from God, all right? So once again, we showed in the lesson today how the Most High gave that power on to kings, that same sovereignty we spoke about, that you can do whatever you want. You have full creative control. The sovereign created all of those things, all of those realms. When it comes to the church, when it comes to anything, the person who's in control has the governing mind of what's happening. They have the creative control mind on what is transpiring. They can do whatever it is that they're willing, all right? This is the image of God. He passed that on to kings. He passed that then on to first to the church, then to the kings, then to civil authorities. All right. We went into sovereignty. That it means to have absolute supreme power in your control. Christ, when he rose, all right, and he sent us forth, Matthew 20:18 said, hey, all power is given unto me in the heavens and in the earth. He then gained that supreme power. God had the supreme power. Till Christ died, resurrected, he wasn't sovereign of the whole universe. God was the sovereign. He never gave that position up. So when Christ is in the old covenant going about, he's going and representing the sovereign. He became the sovereign when he died, resurrected. He became sovereign of the whole universe. Everything. Every realm, everywhere, even in the bad realm, he became sovereign. So even in their own jurisdiction, he became sovereign. Down in hell, he became sovereign. Everywhere, he became the sovereign. All right, that's what absolute power means. Christ has absolute sovereign power in any single realm, anywhere, any jurisdiction. He is exempt from everything. All right, we went into the understanding that kings or Christians, bishops, archbishops, they're kings. Kings come from archbishops. Archbishops, in this day, modern day Christian era, they anoint the kings. They create the civil world. The civil world doesn't create the spiritual world. All right, that's not the way God made it. The spiritual world creates this world. So that's why he has them anointing the fleshly ones. All right, and God made kings, nations, independent sovereign bodies as examples of himself. We went to Romans 1:20 to show that this is how God teaches us. This is me. This is how I operate, by showing you and giving you these little examples. All right, we went into sovereign immunity to show you that, even when you have this now, you have an automatic immunity when you're in a certain jurisdiction. You have the right to operate. You have the right to do things. The right to make laws, legislative, the right to go out and act out those laws and make a judgment based on those laws, the right to repeal and change those laws, the right to go to a next jurisdiction and still enact those laws. These are simple, sovereign understanding that we must understand from God's standpoint, to understand how the world works as well, and to understand how God works, how Christ works. All right, we went into sovereign immunity and crown immunity. That, the sovereign can do, once again, no wrong. Even for it to be sued by his own people to do anything, it has to give permission to that. This is complete sovereign control and power. This complete sovereign control and power is in God, and God bestowed it to these places and people, and we have to understand and respect that. And the biggest blow to that, which we just went to, is Romans 13. When you find out that you didn't respect that, and now you gotta follow an authority, because this is a law. You must respect sovereignty. You must respect sovereignty. Whoever's sovereignty it is must be respected. And this is how the world is based on, where people, different sovereign states, are respecting sovereign states, because you gotta respect God. God has to be respected. So this is why sovereignty is respected. This is a very deep thing where immunity, all of that has to be given. The nations understand how God works. This must be respected. The people who don't understand how this works is people, because they want to go against sovereign authority. And this is why Romans 13 is written there. You do what the sovereign's saying to do. Wherever sovereign you're under, your heart chose to go there. That's where you're at. And when it comes now to Corona and all of that, this is why people want to come out and jump ship. Because now they realize that, yo, you can't deal with that. Once again, sovereign immunity or crown immunity, once again, means that the sovereign cannot be judged, can't be judged in his own court. So people who want to, I want to go against America, I want to go against Canada, you can't just do it like that. Even I was in the wrong. Until I understood this, I'm thinking, you can just go up and battle these people and they have sovereignty. And even when I was dealing with a lawyer one time, he told me this. He said, yo, the system they're sovereign. And it's just coming around now that, you know what? It is sovereign. You can't just boss them around. You gotta respect sovereignty. You gotta respect God. And this is what we're seeing. The whole system is based on that. You don't get that type of respect because you're not God. So for you to have that type of sovereignty, you have to have some aura of God on you. And once you don't, that means you're not close to God. All right. So we went through, broke down what we went through. We're going to go to Philippians 4 and 8.
Philippians chapter 4, starting at the 8th verse. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true.
All right, so it's true. It's true that sovereignty came from on high. It's from God. God does whatever he wants. God has creative property control. God could form you. God could twist up my cheek right now. God could take one eye out, put the eye in my knee. He could do whatever he want to do. He could do whatever he want. Because it's his control. He has creative property control as a sovereign. He passed this on to others. System, the government, the church, the king, all these people are in representation of God's power, and it must be respected. These are true things. Continue.
Whatsoever things are honest.
All right, it's honest. All right, that God is sovereign. He does whatever he wants. Christ does whatever he wants. The Queen does whatever she wants. The United States of America, guess what they do? All right. The SC Community Church of Christ. Whatever we want, okay? God does whatever he wants. Christ does whatever he wants. But everybody within this realm follows the true sovereign, which is God Almighty, the Father. And it's all according to his plan that no one can go outside of. All right, give us the next one.
Whatsoever things are just.
All right, so it's just. It's just. It's just that what's happening right now. Vaccination for the people subject. Your sovereign wants to do something to you. It's just. Yes, I never even thought I would say that, but this is what you need. You're under your thing. Follow your orders. Follow the orders or leave. We had this same thing when we were part of a church, and we're like, you know what? When people are doing something bad, you don't complain. Guess what you do?
Leave.
You vacate, create your own, do your own, and it stems now to church, stems down to us wanting to create our own community, and even bigger and further than that. All right, continue.
Whatsoever things are pure.
Pure. Some people wouldn't say, hey, government's doing this. This is happening. When you're dealing with sovereignty, people are within their right to do what we're asking. Guess what? Whatever they want. That's what we're understanding. They could do whatever they want. That's pure. That's fine. They could do whatever they want. That's a part of sovereignty. Get with it. You just mad because guess what? You're not God. And you're not close to God. So you don't know what that feels like. You don't know what creative power feels like. You don't know what doing what you want to do feels like. You get up every day and you got to do what you got to do. All right, continue.
Whatsoever things are lovely.
All right, it's lovely when you're come across the sovereignty of God, when you experience that, when God brings you into his sovereignty, when God brings you into his church, when God brings you and introduces you to Christ. All right, you now become sovereign. It's beautiful. Continue.
Whatsoever things are of good report.
Right? We just went through. People would have said sovereignty is bad. This is bad. People would have even said giving vaccinations to their citizens is bad. But when we went down to it, they can give to their citizens what the hell ever they want. It's theirs. They created them. Look at the documents, all of that. That's all their stuff. You're their creation. Understand the world. Continue.
If there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things. Those things which ye have both learned and received and heard and seen in me, do, and the God of peace shall be with you.
All right, and the God of peace, all right, the Most High Almighty, Ahaya Yeshua Christ, our Lord and Savior, will be with you. He'll bestow to you some form of sovereignty for you to touch, to feel God. Feeling sovereignty is feeling God. When you're on the other end of that, that's feeling God as well. You got to feel God on both sides. All right, so with that being said, we want to say all praises be unto the Most High Almighty, Ahaya Yeshua Christ. This is the SC Community Church of Christ, sovereign in his ways. I am Archbishop Shamar.
And I'm Bishop Arak.
And this was your Sabbath report / lesson, the sovereignty of God, part 2. We will have a part 3, maybe even a part 4. All right, but with that being said, enjoy the rest of your Sabbath day. Enjoy the Lord's Day coming tomorrow as we have a two Christian Day weekend. And yes, peace and blessings.
Yes.
All right.